This is a tutorial on array lists. I'm not going to be teaching you the basics of array lists. For that, I'm going to link in my video in the upper right here on how to just the basics of array lists. This is going to assume you've already done that and you've done some problems and practice it. And then these are a little more advanced, kind of testing your skills. So the first problem I've got here is we have an array list coming in with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you want to rotate by 2. And this is a really common computer science term. To rotate means you take things from the right, to rotate right, you would take it from the right and put it in the left. But in this case, it's rotating left. So you'll take the 1 on the left and you'll stick it over on the right. So the 1 and the 2 get stuck over here, and then what we're left is 3, 4, 5, 1, 2. So let's go through this problem. On each of these problems, I'm going to give you 2 opportunities to stop the video and try to figure out things on your own. And it's really important you do that because just seeing the solution really doesn't help you learn. What helps you learn is having you think and recall and use your memory to figure out things and to stumble around and finally find the solution. That's when it's going to let you learn. So the first opportunity is right now is you should stop the video and write some pseudocode on how to do this function. Pseudocode means you're going to write the ideas of what you're going to do in the code, but not any of the code itself. So hopefully by now you've written some pseudocode, and we're going to go through what you're going to have to do. So first you're going to have to loop through this input array count times. Count is the number of items that we're going to shift. So we're going to have to shift however many times, in this case, for example, rotating by 2. So we're going to need to do it twice. In that loop, we would try to use a for each loop whenever possible, but we cannot use a for each loop in this case because we're going to have to do a remove. So instead, we're going to have to write a for loop, and we're going to, each time in the loop, we're going to grab the first item in the list, this one here, and then eventually this one here, and we're going to stick it on the end. So we're going to add it to the end of the list. So again, we're going to write that for loop here. I've got an index loop that's going to proceed over each of the items. And then to remove the first item, you can do an input.remove. The 0 specifies which index we're going to look at. Luckily, we always can just grab the first one. And then we're going to have to add it to the list. And we can just put an input.add. Add will always add it to the end. You can specify where you want to put it, but we know it's going to be at the end, so we just leave that. And when we run this, it works fine. So that's the simplest problem. We didn't have any complications. The complications with array lists arise if you need to, first of all, if you need to remove something, you can't use a for each loop. Second, sometimes when you remove or you add things, your index needs to be adjusted. So let's take a quick look. Why did we not need to adjust our index? We removed something here. Shouldn't we have brought the index back? Well, we started here at index 0, and then we removed it, and then we stuck it off in the end. Now the new index 0 is right here, but we are again removing index 0. So we don't need to change the index. This next function I've got is called remove. It takes an array list. I've got a sample input here and a target value, and it's going to remove that target value from the entire input list. So this time we're going to actually have to deal with indices. So when we walk down this original input list, we're going to use a for loop because we are going to be doing some removes. And we'll start here, and we'll check to see, is it the same value that we're looking for? Nope. We're going to move to the next one. Is it the same value? Nope. Is it the next one? This one is the same value. So we're now at index 0, 1, 2, so we want to remove that. Everything to the right will slide back down, so there'll be another 2 here. Now, the for loop will then move on to the next one, which would actually be the 3. So what we need to do is we actually need to decrement the index to point 1 before it, so that when the for loop comes around to the next thing, it'll be pointing at this second 2. If we don't do that, it's going to skip it. So let's go ahead and pause the video and try to write the pseudocode for that. Write exactly what pseudocode you need in order to be able to create the function. So hopefully you've now written some pseudocode. So let's go and write the pseudocode for ourselves. So first we're going to loop through each element in the original input list. And we wanted to check for each element, if the element matches the value, then we're going to remove it. And we also have to adjust the index. So now I want you to try to go ahead and write the code. And hopefully by now you've tried to write the code. So let's take a look at what the code should be. So we're going to have a for loop. And then we are going to check to see if the input.get of that index, so we're going to look at each one of these, is equal to the target. If it is equal to the target, then we want to remove it from the index. And again, this is why we can't use a for each loop, because we're going to be removing things on this array list. And then we need to adjust the index. Now, let me for a moment try not adjusting the index. Let's leave that off and see what happens. I'm going to run this. Okay, I just had to get rid of an extra bracket. When I run it, here's the original list. So we want both of these 2's to be removed. But as I was saying earlier, if you don't adjust the index, it skips this second 2 and it moves on. So you do need to have this index adjusted there. Now let's run it. And now it gets rid of it. So that's an example of where you need to adjust the index when you add or remove items in an array list and you continue to move on to do more work in it. Next up, I've got a function supplement, and supplement is going to be adding things to the array list. Similar problem, but different. We have another input array, same as before, and now we've got a target number, but instead of removing the target number, we're going to actually add this padding element before each target. So there could be multiple items in this input array, and each time we find it, we're going to have to add another item. So I want you to try to write some pseudocode. You know that you're going to have to look down this input, seek out these elements, and when you find it, then you're going to have to insert this padding at the same element where you found it. So hopefully you've tried to write that pseudocode. Now we're going to go through what that pseudocode looks like. First thing to note is that you cannot use a for each loop because we are adding to the array lists again. We also can't use an iterator because we need to add things to the array list, and iterators can only remove things. They can't add. So we're going to look through the list manually with a for loop. If we find that target value, then we want to insert the value right there at that same index. And then we need to increment the index, because if we leave, now that we've inserted an item, the next element that we're looking at in the for loop will be the same element we just looked at. So we have to increment the index by 1, otherwise we're going to keep on going over and over again. So now we want you to try to write the code, and then hopefully by now you've tried to write that code, so let's go ahead and start putting some code out. So we're going to write a simple for loop over the size, and to check the target value, we use the input.get, the index, check it against that target value, and then to insert the value, we can do the add, and I mentioned add can take an index, and in this case we're not adding it to the end, we're actually adding it at the same place, the index that we found the item at, which is again going to move the item we were just looking at one more. So now we're going to need to increment. So let's go ahead and try running that. So here's the list we came in with the input, the ones that we had just done the removes to from, and we're going to supplement every element of 3 with 6. So here you see the 3, there was a 6 stuck in before it, and then there's another 3, there's a 6 stuck in before it. Now let's try removing this index. What happens if we don't increment the index? As I mentioned, it probably will never complete. You see, it's still running. So it's in an infinite loop now because it keeps on inserting one before it over and over and over again. So I'll just go ahead and stop it. It's not going to run. So you got to make sure that you do the index there. So the next one I'm going to show you, I call make even. We've got an array list input here, And here's an example of the before. And we're going to check the length of each of these words. If it is odd length, so here's an even one, it goes, it just gets copied over, or it doesn't get modified. If it is an odd one, so this one has 5 letters here, we remove it from the list. We stick it at the end with a dash or an underscore after it to make it even. So newbie just gets left, Jen just gets left, Miles gets pulled off and stuck on the end, and Barbara gets pulled off and stuck on the end as well. So you can see that the overall function is you're going to need to look through your input. You're going to have to check each item to see whether it's odd. If it is odd, you're going to have to stick it at the end with an extra character. You're going to have to remove it from where it is and move on. So try to write some pseudocode for that. Hopefully by now you have tried to do that. So let's take a look at that pseudocode. So again, we can't use a for each loop because of the removes that we're going to be doing. So we're going to write a regular for loop. And for each item, we're going to check if the length is odd. And if so, we're going to remove it and adjust the index so we don't skip the next one. Oh, we almost forgot about that. So when we remove the item, we need to, for example, Mitch here. We remove Mitch, index is at 1. We removed Mitch. The next index that the for loop is going to point at us at is 2. But 2 actually would be Jen, and we would have skipped newbie. So we have to bring it back 1. So we're going to adjust the index so we don't have to skip the next one. And we're going to have to put an even length version of it at the end. Now, hopefully you will stop the video and write some code now. But let's go ahead and take a look at that code. So it's going to be a simple for loop. And we need to get the string. And if the length is odd, then we want to do an input.remove. And we already have the string. We had the string from before, so otherwise we would have had to, normally you would probably want to put it at the end before you remove it. And in fact, it doesn't make any difference because since we're sticking it at the end, we aren't going to affect the index. I decremented the index right here with a post decrement. That's a compact way of doing it. So let's try running this and see what happens. Okay, good. So Mitch got moved and newbie got left, but Miles got moved and Barbara got moved. It doesn't actually look like they got moved because they're still at the end, but they did get stuck at the end. Now I want to try showing you what happens if I don't do this post decrement. So if I don't do the decrement, we're going to skip some. So after we do Mitch, newbie will be fine because it is even. After we do Miles, then we'll miss Barbara. So let's see what happens. Yeah, so again, we missed Barbara. Or, well, Barbara is still here. It never got moved because we didn't decrement that index. So you want to make sure you decrement that index, and then Barbara will get adjusted. I have one last problem to show you. Many of you know that remove all is a set operation that is available for sets. But what I've done is I've written a remove all for array lists here. So the way a remove all works is you have some kind of a source that you start with, and then you have something that you remove from it. So for example, I've got this source here, and I've got a list of things to remove, some of which may or may not be in that set. So for example, there's a 6 here, which it won't affect it at all. But there's a 3, there's a 5, and a 2 here. So that 3, 5, and 2 get removed, and what's left is the 4 and the 1. So the source is modified to have 4 and 1, and then the return value, something that remove all doesn't do, but I wish it did, is that it should return the things that it did remove. So here I'm going to return a new array list with 3, 5, and 2. So the basic algorithm is that you should be walking down either the source or the removes, one or the other, and then you look to see in the other list if each of those items is there. If it is, then you're going to need to remove it from the source. Again, it doesn't matter which way you start. As long as you find it in both, you're going to remove it from the source, and you're going to put it into a return. And that's the basic algorithm. So I want you to write some pseudocode. Hopefully by now you've done that. So let's go ahead and show you the pseudocode. So we're going to have a for each loop. So there's two different ways you could do this. You could have a for loop over the source and then look up the removes. But if you do a for each over the removes, it will allow us to remove the items from the source without affecting the for each loop here. So that's going to result in shorter code. So I'm going to do it that way. I'm going to for each over the removes. For each remove, we're going to use index of in the source to find where it is. You could write a nested loop, but that would be less efficient and certainly more code for you than using index of. So index of will tell us. So we'll look at this 3 and we'll check for the index of 3 in this list, just so happens to be the first one. And then we'll check for the 5. The index of is going to be 2. So we're going to find each index of, and if it exists, which means that the index of isn't -1, then we want to remove that element from the source and save that value. And then we need to add it to a new value to be removed. And I didn't mention here, but you're going to have to create an array list to return as well. Now, I'm not actually going to show you the code in order to that will do this function. Oh, one last thing is you're going to need to return the list at the end. I'm not going to actually show you the code to do this one. I want you to try the code on your own to see if you can figure it out. But this concludes our tutorial. If you can do all of these problems on your own completely, you will have no problem. You have now mastered sets. So congratulations. But I really hope that you did it on your own. If you didn't, please go back and try to do these ones on your own. That will really cement the learning for you. This is one of many videos that I've created for building Java programs, complete class on Java. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. That helps other people find my videos. And I've also got 2 other tutorials that I'm releasing. This one is on ArrayLists, but I've got a second one on sets and a third one on maps. So I will try to provide links to those up here as well.